So there's good news and bad news for fans of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. The good news is that Nintendo has added a form of fast travel to the game, which is sorely needed. The bad news is that it's only accessible using the brand new Princess Zelda and Loftwing Amiibo figure. Did anyone really expect anything less from the company that invented a video game made of cardboard? This being an issue about Nintendo's business practice, there's already something of a debate raging online. On one side there are people who accuse Nintendo of taking advantage of their fans. On the other side there are Nintendo fans who insist that if you don't want to buy the plastic toy you should just not buy it and stop complaining. As much as I'd love to pick a side, I seem to have found myself firmly stuck on the fence here. Both sides are right. This is a shocking business practice that is terrible for consumers, but it's kind of exactly what the most dedicated Zelda fans want. It's pure evil genius, but it's still genius. Skyward Sword often gets a bad rap from fans of the Zelda series, for, let's face it, not exactly being Breath of the Wild or Ocarina of Time. I think people can often be a bit harsh on this game, which, despite not being the genre-defining pinnacle of the series, is still a solid, absolutely beautiful game. Skyward Sword also shows how vital it is to provide not just a good game, but also a good user experience. On the Wii, the game is difficult to play. I don't mean it's got an intentionally hard difficulty, it's not Dark Souls, but rather its design means that it's physically taxing to actually interact with the game. Part of this is the controls, which I've complained about in the past, so I'll spare you a retread. But that's only part of the issue. Another barrier the player faces comes in the form of the world design. Most Zelda games have some form of open world, which unlocks gradually as the player gains new abilities. The world feels increasingly interconnected over time as the player slowly gets better at navigating the space. Not so with Skyward Sword, which is made up of a series of isolated, separate areas that can only be accessed from a central hub. This fragmented world design makes traversal a bit of a chore, and it really shows how adding just a few extra steps to navigation can slow down and frustrate the player over time. The developers at the helm of the Zelda franchise are very well aware of this criticism, said longtime series producer Eiji Aonuma. The way that game world was set up was that you had kind of separate areas, separate strongholds, that you'd sort of land in and explore. But they were all self-contained, and they weren't really connected together. We listened to a lot of opinions from people who played Skyward Sword, and a lot of people said to us how they found the game not exactly unsatisfying, but they wished they could have explored the areas between the strongholds. The nice thing about doing a remaster is you can go in and tweak some of the elements in the game's design that didn't work too well the first time around. With Skyward Sword, it's clear that the developers believe that several key elements can be improved upon to make the game experience less, for lack of a better word, annoying. So the game comes with button controls, for those who don't want the motion controls for whatever legitimate reasons. The game also features the ability for the player to warp out of any of the game's various locales and even dungeons back to the central village of Skyloft, whenever the player needs to. It doesn't completely fix the game's navigational issues and world design, but it's likely to make an impact on the user experience. Except, Nintendo gonna Nintendo. This fast travel system is only available if you buy a pretty plastic Zelda figure, the last aging remnant of the long-crumbled Toys-to-Life empire. What's more, Nintendo has recognised that their Amiibo figures are often bought up by scalpers who sell them at a far higher cost, and people willingly pay these costs. So Nintendo's cutting out the middleman and is scalping customers instead. The new Amiibo will cost $25 instead of the standard $15. And why would Nintendo do such a customer-unfriendly thing? Simple, because it works. This is actually what people want. There's not actually a lot of Zelda merchandise available at the moment, especially if you're looking for toys or figurines. Zelda isn't a brand like Mario. Nintendo doesn't have an endless partnership with Jakks Pacific pumping out new plastic toys. And in fairness, the Zelda brand is aimed at a slightly older audience, an audience which may not be too interested in action figures, but goes absolutely Yiga Clan bananas for Amiibo. The Zelda range of Amiibo figures is as broad as the individual figures are scarce. There are tons of these figures, way more than for most Nintendo franchises. They're also impossibly hard to get hold of, thanks Nintendo, but that's beside the point. This is where I kind of have to see the Nintendo Defender's argument. The franchise's fans really do want more Zelda Amiibo, and if it offers a fun, useful feature within the game, all the better. Because, I hate to say it this way, but it is just a quality of life improvement. It means that no actual content is being locked away from players. And let's face it, how often do I leave a dungeon in a Zelda game midway through? If I ever try that, I immediately forget what I was doing and where I'd already explored. The Twilight Princess or Breath of the Wild Amiibo support is kind of worse, locking away exclusive content, a dungeon, items, costumes, even Epona the horse herself, behind a paywall. Alternatively, there's games like Samus Returns, which lock a harder difficulty setting away from any peasants who don't own a Metroid Amiibo. I mean literally a Metroid Amiibo, not a Samus Amiibo. I'm not doing that. It's not a stupid joke, I promise. At the end of the day, I guess I'm going to pre-order the Zelda Loftwing Amiibo as soon as it becomes available. If only because I'd rather pay retail price for it than double that from CEX in 6 months' time. Maybe that's how Nintendo gets you. The scalpers are actually good for business for them, because they create greater scarcity than otherwise would exist. Especially for Amiibo figures which offer otherwise inaccessible in-game perks. Well played, Nintendo. Well played. Evil, but kinda brilliant. Anyway, this video could really do with a thumbs up. Is there any chance you could press that like button? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.